Welcome, everyone, to It's a Wrap with Rap. I am your host, Ron Rappaport. This podcast features people who have overcome life's challenges and adversities, people who can inspire, motivate, and educate us on an assortment of topics. Today, we are so pleased to have as our guest, Jeff Johnston. Jeff has experienced compound loss, first his 23-year-old son to fentanyl poisoning in 2016, and now most recently, his wife of 21 years to addiction. But Jeff is living undeterred by loss, doing what he can to change the narrative in this country when it comes to mental health, overdose, and addiction. Jeff is launching the Living Undeterred tour this spring, where he hopes to raise awareness and bring people together, all working toward a common goal. Jeff has written a book, This One's for You, the story of one family's struggle through addiction and their journey to find inspiration and meaning in the face of death. Jeff also writes a blog and hosts the Living Undeterred podcast. Welcome, Jeff, to the podcast.
Hey, Ron, thanks a lot. I'm happy and honored to be on It's a Wrap with Ron Rappaport.
Well, you are so kind. It's a pleasure to have you.
This could be a good experience, and it's always enlightening to meet new people too.
Well, thank you. And our audience is great. And this is a subject that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be interested in. Jeff, what was life like for you and the family before that memorable day in 2016?
Wow, that's a great question, because it is kind of a line in the sand. There's the Jeff before 6:30 a.m., 10/4/16, and then there's the Jeff after. And what I was like, Ron, was this. I was, at the time, I was 50 years old. Started an investment company at the age of 23, built it to a firm of about $700 million under management, which is get us bigger than most banks in this area. Had 9 advisors and 7 full-time staff. I was healthy, happy, married, 3 kids, pretty much had it. I'm 50 years old. I had reached kind of that pinnacle that you try to get to when you're younger.
Sure.
But like everybody, every family, there was underlying cracks. We had addiction problems with our oldest son. Seth was prescribed Adderall at 16, and that really kind of hastened his journey of the addiction and substance abuse, spiraling descent into his own personal hell, and drug us down with him for 6 years. And we tried everything. Started with Adderall, then it went marijuana, alcohol, and then by 18 or 19, it been cocaine. And then he was arrested for drunk driving, arrested for some other things. All this is chronicled in the book. And then he was incarcerated in prison. At 22, he went to prison for something. And we thought that was it. We thought rock bottom had been had. And a lot of times they'll tell you in alcohol and substance abuse and recovery that you got to hit rock bottom. Well,
right.
We were hoping, my wife and I, that this was rock bottom for Seth. And I was in Florida, actually in Clearwater, got a call that my lawyer said, "Hey, I got great news, Jeff. We got Seth out of prison." And I turned to my wife at the time and I said, "This is terrible news." And within 60 days, he was dead. And what happened was, on October 4th, 2016, I got the call every parent dreads, the call you get when you join that club that you don't ask to join, and you certainly can never leave. It's the club of losing a child. And so that day, everything changed for me, and my life came crumbling down. And not only did I have to figure out a way to tell my wife that our son died, I had to then show strength as as I don't want to sound, in this day and age, you got to be careful how you word things, but kind of as the man of the house. That's kind of how I grew up. It was my responsibility on my watch, is I had to protect the rest of the family. I had to try to save my wife and myself, and then my 2 boys. And the day that the boys came home, so Ian was 15 and Roman was 13 when their older brother died.
Right.
And the day they came home, I had to figure out a way how I could make this a very important life lesson for all of us. And I struggled with it. And I called my dad. My dad's a doctor. And I said, "Hey, Dad, how do I tell the boys that their brother's dead?" I didn't say it in that context because I was an emotional wreck.
Sure.
And my dad said, "Here's what you do, Jeff. You tell them the truth, and then you shut your mouth." And he said, "That's the key. Stop talking." He goes, "I know you like to talk. You're going to want to explain everything. Let them ask questions." So I did. The boys came home. I sat them down. I said, "Boys, I got terrible news. your older brother is dead. And my middle son, Ian, goes, Dad, how'd he die? Drugs? Because they'd been along on the journey. And I said, yes. I didn't say anything. And you could hear the tension, not feel it, but you could hear it. And both of their eyes just swelled up, and so did mine. And I just thought to myself, okay, here you go, Dad. This is your shining moment. This is what you've been working for your whole life. This is the moment that what comes out of my mouth next is going to frame how we live the rest of our lives. And I tell you, Ron, I didn't rehearse this. I don't know where it came from. It's a chapter in my book called The Two Roads. And this is what I said. I said, boys, we have two roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred. We'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation. And this can be the single greatest event in our life to make our lives better and those around us. I'm on the second road, and I ask you to join me.
Wow.
And that's what I said. And I swear I said it that easy, that rehearsed, but I'd never rehearsed it. I wanted to be very spontaneous with the boys and very authentic.
Yeah.
And I took my dad's advice, and that's what I did. I shut my mouth, but then after a few seconds, that came out. And that two roads metaphor became a pivot point in our family, certainly in my life. And that's where in the book, I talk about the two roads. My nonprofit's called the Choices Network. And I wanted a nonprofit that embodied the decision-making process. In other words, choices precede consequences. So I didn't want to be sober living or anti-drugs or don't do this or don't do that.
Right.
I wanted to be something that held you are accountable for your choices, and get away from this victim mentality that we have. And so that was my nonprofit, kind of came out of that two roads idea. And so that's what we did. And then really right after it happened, Ron, I went straight downhill. My wife and I just, basically thought the way to grieve was to get drunk. And I was already an alcoholic. I've been drinking since 8th grade, 6-7 days a week, which is amazing how I could be so successful in business, but be an alcoholic, which, as I find out later, is pretty common.
You were functioning.
Yeah, I was functioning. But I was deteriorating. I was 190 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm 149 now. And I ate poorly. I didn't sleep well. My stomach hurt. I had headaches all the time, but I was making money, and who cared, right? And now I lost my son. So on December 24th, 2017, that was a really important day for me. That was an epiphany moment where I woke up from a bender with my wife. And at that time, I just said, this is it. I'm done. I'm tired of being tired. I'm drawing the proverbial line in the sand.
Right.
And I quit drinking. And I will tell you, Ron, I primarily quit to help my wife, because my wife both of us were really going downhill quickly. She was literally drinking herself to death. And I thought, well, I can quit. I can't get her to quit, but I certainly can quit myself.
Sure.
You have to control what you can control.
Right.
And that's what I did. And as it turned out, it was easy. I've never struggled with going back to drinking. It's been arguably one of the easiest things I've ever done in my life. And I write and I talk about, I'm trying to change this stigma where alcoholics feel so captured and so imprisoned by this disease approach that say it's true, you still don't have to believe it. And I've got a saying I like to tell people is that you're always free to tell yourself a new story about your past. So whatever you're told, you are. So the doctor told my son, hey, you're going to be a werewolf at midnight. Here's a pill. It's called Adderall. BS. I call BS on that. And so now someone says, well, I'm an alcoholic, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And then every day I torture myself with thinking about alcohol. Again, I'm not going to play those narratives. So I just decided I didn't want to drink and I quit. Now, I know I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. A lot of people can't do that. I'm very compassionate on that aspect, but I think more people out there are like me. They just got to find a why. And you're going to say, what's your why? You bury your child. You can't find a why out of that.
Yeah.
Then you're a sorry soul. You're a sorry soul. You need a lot of help, because that should be plenty of motivation. Now, unfortunately, for my wife, it wasn't. And she continued, and I tried to help, and I stood back and just watched another train wreck. And I love My wife, we were married 21 years. She was the best mom and wife I could possibly have had. And then watching another person throw their hands up and give in, not give up, she gave in. I mean, my wife fought probably the best that she could have. And she eventually, her body just quit. And when she passed away, she weighed 80 pounds and was in a wheelchair, and she was 46 years old. And so on June 29th of last year, 9 months ago, I buried my wife of 46 years. And so where I'm going with all this is I submit to people when I speak to them that I'm candid and sincere about this. I'm a better human being today than I was before all this happened. And I've found ways in my practices that I've developed myself that I now I talk to people about this living undeterred mindset that I've kind of, I won't say developed. None of what I have is new. I've just repackaged it to something that works for me. Sure. And so, if this guy from Iowa that's never made honor roll in college, I'm not overly smart, can pull this off, well, then so can you. I mean, so can anybody. And so what I spend my time on now is talking to people about, again, changing the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. So what's changing the narrative? Well, stigmas, labels, the way we approach things, the way we view things. Those are all important things. So that's my story, and that's where I'm at. I started a podcast last January called Living Undeterred, and I talked every day to people that have just amazing stories. And in sharing my story, I have learned that it opens the gate of permission for others to share their stories. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's a beautiful thing. And, to cry as a grown man in front of people isn't humiliating. It isn't shameful. That takes courage. That takes courage and bravery. It does, but you do it enough and it just becomes a bodily function. It becomes something that I need to use the restroom to cleanse my body. It's the same thing as crying for me. It's just, I need it. I embrace it. I lean into it. These are all little tiny, metaphors that I like to use, like leaning into it. Well, you're out there helping people, Jeff, but by the same token, you're also helping yourself. No question. Ron, when you're in an airplane and you hit turbulence, what's the first thing the stewardess says? She says, when the oxygen comes down, put it on yourself first before you help anyone else. Right. You're exactly right. Well, you just said, people think I'm doing something heroic. I'm not. I'm selfish. I'm doing this to save Jeff Johnston because I am no good as a dad to my other two boys if I'm dead. So sure, right. I'm helping people, but like you said so eloquently, Ron, I am selfishly helping myself with this journey and projects I'm doing because I want to live a great life. I don't want to die, and I don't want to be in full of pain and suffering. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jeff, what inspired you to share your story publicly? What was the inspiration? I ran into some pushback. There were certain family members that weren't too thrilled about me sharing my story. There was this perception I was making money or something, and I've never made a penny on anything. My book's been a losing financial proposition. That's why I never count how many books I've sold. I just know what's in my nonprofit because all my profits go into my nonprofit. Sure. Which isn't much, and what is in there is mostly my money anyway that I put in myself. So, I don't know. I mean, it's a combination of many things, I guess I would say. Okay. Because I had a light bulb moment when I shared my cancer story, started doing it publicly. I told someone that I was going in for cancer surgery, and they said, "What kind of cancer?" And I said, "Breast cancer." And they started laughing. And they said, "You're joking, right?" I said, "No, I'm not joking." And it was like a light bulb, like, hey, wait a minute. Other people shouldn't have to go through this, because I heard about, the stigma and exactly, woman's disease and all this kind of stuff. And then have breasts too. Exactly. But there's a lot of people out there that don't understand that. And, right.
And it's bad because, again, like what you were saying, some men go, oh, it's the victim thing. I'm a victim of this. And, they think they're freaks and that kind of thing. And so they don't go in when they should go in and get treated and that kind of thing. So that was my inspiration, how I did that. So it's just curious what your inspiration was. But moving along, the opioid crisis resulting in poisoning, not so much overdosing anymore, is getting worse. What is your opinion on the cause, the mental health aspect, and what is your opinion on what we can do to reverse the trend?
Well, the cause part, I'll talk about first, because there's a lot of moving parts there, and you'll have to remind me of the second half of the question, because I'll inevitably forget.
Will do.
So the cause part, I think there's a shift in the paradigm right now. It's like when my son died, fentanyl had been around for a little while. I mean, my son was in 2016, but I know parents that have lost kids in 13 and 14. And so it goes back a little bit, but my son was trying to get high with heroin. He wasn't trying to die. And the amount of fentanyl that can kill you can go on the tip of a pencil. It isn't much. And, I think most people are pretty aware that drug dealers aren't pharmacists. They don't know how to cut, fentanyl correctly. And it's just ironic because they are putting it in these things that are killing their customers. But the thing is that fentanyl increases the potency of the high. And so addicts, and I've never done drugs my entire life, but I understand the concept of a high because I'm a compulsive gambler. And I understand chasing the next win or the loss. I mean, it's the same type of thing as an addict. And so I don't do that anymore. But when I did, I certainly could relate to somebody trying to ratchet up the high. So fentanyl's added increase the potency. The microdosing element of it is an issue as well, because like I said, drug dealers don't have pharmaceutical licenses to cut this stuff. So they're just, they're in the woods of Colombia, the jungles of Colombia cutting this stuff. And, but the paradigm shift is interesting, Ron, because back when my son died, it was like, well, he should have known better. He knew that it was, Russian roulette. He was an addict. It was almost a stigma like, well, it sucks, Jeff, but he kind of earned it, and that's just a ridiculous stigma. That's just comes from someone very naive. It doesn't understand. Nobody earns it. He was just looking to get high. He wasn't trying to die. No different than the guy sitting on the couch watching the Super Bowl drinking a 12-pack. Right. He doesn't die. Or the guy eating pizza at halftime. He doesn't die. Those can all be unhealthy things too. So I just think that stigma is ridiculous. So what's happened, Ron, is fentanyl now shows up. And now you're having people dying that have never done drugs, that aren't addicts, that aren't the substance abusers. And that's the paradigm shift. And that's where this one pill kills campaign that's out there right now. 42% of the pills on the market today are counterfeit. They're made in, the jungles, or made in the back press rooms where they press these pills. 42%. So almost half the pills out there on the market. And those are pills that have enough fentanyl in them to potentially kill a human.
So we're talking about pills that are illegally bought.
Right. Illegally made.
Illegally made.
And
we know that they use fentanyl, from what I understand, as a filler in a lot of cases, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I guess it's cheap. And that's what.
Yeah. So one thing I like to cover, if it's okay, if I can jump a little bit to something I'm really interested in, is when this all happened with me with my son, the first reaction was to me to go after the drug cartels, like Rambo, go out there and go right to the source. And then it was go after big pharma, Jeff, and obviously there's a lot of emphasis on that. And actually the amount of opioids prescribed by doctors in the last decade has been cut 50%. So we have taken a lot of pills off the market, but the deaths have gone up equally, dropped 50, up 50. So it's being replaced by something else. And that's probably what to expect when fentanyl gets off the street. They'll be replaced by something else. We're always going to have these issues.
And Jeff, I understand that we lose in the United States about 100,000 people a year to this.
It's the number one killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45.
Wow.
Over COVID, over cancer, over suicide. The number one death in Americans from 18 to 45 is overdose right now in the United States.
Wow.
Which is shocking because people assume that suicide and alcohol deaths and
Right.
COVID and all those things are more, but it's overdose. So going back to what I was talking about the demand side, I mean, the supply side. So we can chase the drug dealers and the big pharma, and a lot of people are doing that. And we have to do this because it's a multifaceted approach to change this whole issue. But where I really want to spend my time, for me, where I'm most passionate about is the why behind people doing these things in the first place.
Right.
I mean, if you're not doing drugs, then it doesn't matter if there's fentanyl in the pill that you're about to take, because you're not going to take it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it matters obviously for the next person who takes it. But what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the demand side. If we could get the demand down, obviously drugs are here because there's a demand for them. I mean, that's the old supply and demand. So if we can have an emphasis on the demand side, trying to reduce the desire for people to do these things, coupled with reducing the supply, then I think we have a really good chance of down the road, 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, this isn't going to happen overnight. Then I think we have a chance. And so for me, I want to get to the kids, Ron.
Right.
I want to develop programs. I have an initiative right now. It's called the Don't Start Initiative. And I use the acronym ABC. And the A stands for awareness, B stands for breathing, and C stands for choice. And what I've developed is a program for a child in a very quick moment. So Ron, you offer me a vape at a football game and I'm in 8th grade.
Right.
I've got like 10 seconds, right? I can't call mom. My counselor's not there. My teacher's not there. I have to learn on my feet to get out of this situation. So what I've done is I'm trying to get this into schools and I'm trying to promote this. It's called the Don't Start Initiative, and the acronym is ABC. The A is awareness. So the child just needs to be aware that they're in the situation that their mom and dad told them about. Now I'm here. I knew this was coming. Mom and dad told me. Now I'm here. So awareness is the first thing. The second thing is breathing. I've learned through meditation. I meditate 20 minutes every day. It's one of my coping mechanisms. I learned through meditation, when I get my breathing down, good things happen. I become more aware. I don't overthink. I don't think as necessarily at all. I breathe slowly. I'm better making decisions. So if a child can learn, and here's the catch, breathe through your nose. You cannot talk when you're breathing through your nose.
That's true.
So if you are a child and now you're aware you're in a position, breathe through your nose, gives you time to think. If you're talking, you can't think at the same time very well.
Right.
Breathe through your nose, one deep breath, and then make your choice. But just remember, whatever you choose to do, there's a consequence. So, and then I'm going to try to teach kids simple outs, like I'm on medication, or you got like 2 or 3 standard excuses that you can use. And ultimately, it's best if the kid just says, no, I'm not doing it. But we know as parents that doesn't happen.
A long time ago, somebody told me the best thing to tell your child is, oh, I can't do that. I like to do it, but my mom drug tests me all the time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just need a split second to get out of it, And so I don't know. Those are some of the things I'm trying to work on as we progress with this Living Undeterred mission that I'm on.
Well, that ABC is a great thing. Let's move on to the next question. You have a blog and a website. Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, I did the blog for a year and I decided to stop the blog because I've got too many projects going right now. And what was happening was my producer that I have for my show, and she helps me with all my marketing. I was just basically going right to the deadline. And then I was getting sloppy and quickly writing blogs. And I thought, you know what? The moment that this becomes work, I don't want to do it. So I stopped writing my blogs. So I did a
Okay.
year's worth of blogs. The blogs are great. They're video, they're audio, they're great. Some of them are 15 minutes long. My best blog on my podcast, on my website, is called Drown the Beast. And it's a 15-minute blog that I did in my own voice that is about, about choosing not to drink, basically, and the battle and the fight that people have with alcoholism. And it's a good blog, but I was spending a lot of time writing them and producing them and stuff that I figured, I've kind of evolved into something different. So the podcast is great. I love the Living Undeterred podcast. I'm meeting people every day around the country that have been through, different types of grief. And I think one thing that I've learned on this journey, Ron, is it's easy to compare griefs. It's easy to sit there and say, well, Jeff's lost 2 people. I haven't. So Jeff kind of deserves to be more miserable than me. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Grief is grief, and we all handle it differently. And,
Right.
And so I've kind of stopped, comparing, because early on I would, meet someone that had cancer and had brain surgery, and then someone had a child lost by suicide. And then, and now it's like, we're all in this mental health boat together. And that's a really key point for me as I kind of move forward and start working with, collaborating with people, is that, our stories are unique to us. And the other thing, Ron, is everybody has a story. I mean, a day doesn't go by where I meet a stranger and I start telling my story, and then immediately they start telling theirs.
Yeah, it's amazing. Everybody does have a story.
Yeah. We
For
just got to
sure.
talk. We just got to talk more.
This is just something I asked you before we went on the air. And you weren't too aware of it, but I found this out on my own doing some research, and that's about people buying these drugs on what they call the dark web.
Mm-hmm.
You've all heard the term dark web.
Yeah.
Well, apparently there's a browser out there. The name of the browser, unlike Google or one of those, it's called Tor. So the only reason I'm bringing it up is if people want to check their kids, browsers on their phone or whatever. If you see Tor, it means they're using that to get on the dark web, and apparently the dark web is not a good thing. And they're also using a lot of Bitcoin to buy these drugs.
You want to hear the scariest thing out there if I was a parent?
Yeah.
This is to me, the scariest thing, and is Snapchat right now, and the ability for kids to buy drugs off of Snapchat. And it is said right now, based on the DEA's math, that at any given time, there are 80 to 90,000 drug dealers working Snapchat to sell drugs to kids. And these are middle school kids. And what they're doing is they're using codes. So, Snapchat will flag if someone says fentanyl or cocaine or something, they can flag that conversation, like Google does as well, And now these drug dealers are using like pictographs, like the Egyptians use. They're using, pictures to code certain words for types of drugs. And I have a number of different stories that I've run across where I have a good friend of mine that was on my podcast, and I was on hers, that she was actually on Dr. Phil a couple of weeks ago. Amanda Faith's her name. And her son, Luca, died at 13. He bought Percocet on the internet and thought it was Percocet, and it wasn't. And parents are going, now, come on, there's no way. But the reality is it's happening, and drug dealers are now moving into the mobile space. And if parents are naive on these things, and you think drugs now are being bought on the street corner, like maybe you bought them when you were in high school, it's coming in the mail now. It's different. It's a completely different deal. That to me is what's scary about the drugs. But the real mission I'm on is a little bit more encompassing, and that's the mental health initiative. And that's this tour that we're embarking on here in 50 days.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, yep. And that's a mental health, because I look at mental health as the wheel, and overdose, alcoholism, gambling addiction, sex abuse, addiction, depression, anxiety. Those are spokes on the mental health wheel.
Right.
And so for me, as an advocate, think to be the most effective and where I get my most value from is focusing on the mental health aspect. But I know we have to get into each individual topic. But my fear is that we spend so much time eradicating fentanyl that these same kids have other underlying mental health issues that aren't being addressed. And then they end up dying for other reasons, you know?
Right. Right. Absolutely. You wrote a book. This one's for you. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I wrote the book to honor my son, and my wife was still alive at the time. And she wasn't overly excited about me doing this. A lot of people on that side of the family weren't overly excited because the intent wasn't clear, and I think they thought maybe I was doing this some way to profit, and obviously that wasn't the case. And the other thing that I wanted to honor, the other person was my son, Seth. When he died, 3 weeks after he died, his daughter was born.
Oh, wow.
So I have a beautiful granddaughter named Brighton. She's 5 now.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And she's been, I always say, hey, Brighton, you brighten my life. That's my saying to her.
Yeah.
But, when she was born, it was difficult because my wife and I had different opinions on how to get involved. And she was dealing with her own demons at the time. She didn't have enough space in her life to, take in somebody else. So there was a couple of years there where I didn't even meet Brighton. And now I love her to death. I pick her up a couple times a week. I take her to swim lessons. And so I guess talking about the book, part of the honoring the book, the first sentence I have in there talks about Brighton. And that's the only time in the whole book I talk about Seth's child. So the book is an interesting journey, Ron, because I start off in the abyss. I start off with the day Seth died. I start off with all that happened. I go through, then the second chapter is called Seth, and I write about Seth, about coaching him in basketball and all the great things that happened when he was a child and growing up. And then I get into things about his legal troubles and all the other stuff. And then I talk about some of the really great things that we did as a family. My middle son's a college golfer, and he raised $50,000 through golf in high school to set aside for kids battling substance abuse. And he got so much focus on that. CBS Sports came out to our house for 4 days and did a documentary on my son, and it's on the internet. If you just Google Ian Johnston, it's IAN. So Ian Johnston and then CBS Sports, you'll see the 9-minute documentary, and it's actually narrated by Zach Johnson, who's the Ryder Cup captain for the United States golf team this year. And Zach's from our hometown, and Ian played golf 2 summers in a row with Zach. And Zach's very familiar with our story, and he was a big help for promoting what Ian was doing. And then Ian won a national award through the American Junior Golf Association. They picked one junior golfer in the world, male or female, to win this humanitarian award. And they picked my son. And all this came out of his brother dying. And there's another example of the better, not bitter road, where both my sons took what I said that day, and they have embodied it. And so even though there's some casualties in my family, there's also some heroic stories that have happened since all this happened. So I can look people in the eye, Ron, and I can honestly say that I'm a better human being today than I was before this all happened. But living undeterred doesn't mean living untested. So I'm tested every single day.
Absolutely.
Every day. And I fully expect to be tested every day the rest of my life. But I'm ready. At some point, I want to talk to you about the living undeterred mindset foundation, my 3 tenets.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna get into that. And
Yep.
I love the way you took that pain and you changed it into purpose. And I talk about that a lot. Okay, so let's get to it. You are doing the Living Undeterred tour this spring.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about? Where will you be? And what's the objective of the tour?
Well, the way I'm going to start every presentation on the tour is with my quote that has now been ingrained into my soul. And that's purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And that's on the back of our t-shirts. It's on my coffee mugs. It's on all of our marketing materials for the tour. It's purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And that's what drives me. And the tour idea came from, I saw a guy riding his bike across a state that he lived in, raising money for, ironically, for breast cancer, but it was for his wife. And it dawned on me, that's a great idea. I love what the guy's doing. Obviously, this guy wouldn't be doing this if his wife didn't have breast cancer. So for him, it got personal, right?
Just like mine. That's how I got it. I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Right. That's how we all get into these things, right? By personal. But some of us become a passion. Other of us actually becomes a cancer. It also becomes a curse. And I got to make sure people understand that anything that happens to us, there's a quote I like to say, do things happen to you or do things happen for you?
I use that same quote.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Too. So, it's, that's how you have to look at life. So anyway, I saw this guy doing this and I thought, well, I don't want to ride across Iowa, and Iowa's too small. And so I stayed up all night. And again, this is an example of the beauty of attention deficit, which I have. It's a superpower. I stayed up all night. I drew up a 3-page business plan to come up with this Living Undeterred US tour. I didn't tell anyone about it because everyone would talk me out of it. And I thought, okay, I'm bored. I don't like posting and sharing and everything on the internet. I don't want to write another book right now. My blogs, I stopped doing. What else can I do? Well, I want to go to where the problem is. And it's not behind a computer. Right. It's out there on the streets. So I went up to Camping World, which is 45 minutes away, walked in there with my business plan. And I had like 7 copies of books I gave out to all the managers there. And they didn't know me from Adam. I just cold called, walked in. And I said, I want to buy an RV. I want to go around the country, every single state. I'm going to raise $1 million and I'm going to change the narrative of mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. And they're like, okay, sure. Who's this insane guy? And I said, I want to work a deal with you to get a price knocked off an RV and I'll buy it, So they did. They became they became my sponsor. Now I just made up this term, platinum national sponsor. I didn't have one at the time. I just made it up. And that's what I anointed them as. And so Camping World is now my platinum national sponsor. And
it sounds good, Jeff. It sounds great.
I'm the proud owner of a 34-foot RV. I just picked it up on Monday. It's all fully loaded. It's ready to go. We're doing podcasts, live streams, everything. And what I'm going to do is we've got 32 states already signed on. And I leave on May 7th from Cedar Rapids here. We have our kickoff with the mayor going to be supporting us. And what I want to do, Ron, is I want to go around the United States for 95 days with my 2 boys. And I have another friend of mine going who's a keynote speaker. His name's Antarctic Mike. And then we have a documentary crew going too, because there's some people that think that this thing can be big, but that's not my goal, but my goal. It's their goal, not mine. And so, but what we have it set up is we have state partners. So you're in Jacksonville, right?
Right.
Okay. Florida right now is probably set up to be my best state that we have.
We welcome you to the Sunshine State.
Well, I have a stop in Fort Lauderdale. I have the Broward County Opioid Project on board with United Way, and they're going to be our sponsor in Fort Lauderdale. And then I go to Tampa, and I have the Live Tampa Bay Coalition, which is like 40 nonprofits, and they're supporting me there. So I only have 1 stop in each state, except for Florida, California, and Texas, where we're doing 2. So Florida, I'm already booked, but certainly, if you can make it to Tampa, that's closer to you than Fort Lauderdale. Come on down. I'd love to meet you. Enjoy the day. And what it's about is I'm going to pull the RV up. It's going to be fully wrapped, Living Undeterred US tour. It's going to stimulate a lot of conversation. And I've got an hour presentation where I'm going to speak for about 40 minutes. And then I'm asking a local advocate to come up to the stage and share their story. So somebody like me that's in the area, that's lost a loved one, that's got a dog in the hunt, that's passionate, maybe runs a nonprofit, give them a chance to talk about their own program right there in their backyard. And then the real fun part is going to be the panel discussion. And that's the hour after the speaking engagements where we're having a panel discussion. Myself, a clinician from the state partner, maybe another dad or a mom or somebody. And then one of my boys is going to sit in the panel discussion. And what I want to do, Ron, is turn this into a town hall. I want to just answer questions. I want to just sit there and have people fire questions at me. And then ask my son how he handled this as a 13-year-old losing a brother, and really make this an intimate, emotional experience for people. And it's really important to me that this whole tour is an exploration of ideas, not me explaining the way things are, because I certainly don't know that much. But if I keep an open mind, and if I'm willing to listen to every single person out there that's got a story to tell, and then I'm doing my podcast show on the road, we're doing live streams, we've got all these really cool projects going, and I want the spotlight to get off of me. I want this to be about we, and that's my objective. And so people hear about the tour and they think, oh, it's this guy going around promoting his cause. Now I'm not doing that. I think that's going to happen anyway, but I want to promote our cause. I want to talk about the 676 Americans that die each day from overdose, suicide, and alcohol combined. So think about that, Ron. 676 Americans. And you think of one death like Seth, and think of the ripple effect. I mean, Seth's death cost me my wife. She died because of that.
Sure.
And think of all the other relationships that are adversely affected. My granddaughter will grow up never having a dad, her natural dad. So that one decision, that one death on one street in one city, one county, one state, and there's 676 a day. Think of the ripple effects of the generational and the collateral damage. And that's the power of the story that I'm going to be sharing when I'm out there, is that I'm starting every presentation with this. If you've been touched by an opioid overdose or somebody that's died from a drug overdose, stand up. People stand up. Anybody that's lost someone that loved or knew somebody from suicide, stand up. Anyone else in here lost anyone to alcohol abuse, stand up. I bet you I'm going to have 85% of every crowd stand up.
Yeah, no doubt.
I could stand up on all three.
So I would say the crux of this, it's awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's awareness that you're bringing, and people are listening to other people and just trying to change the narrative on mental health, the stigma. Would that be part
because
of it?
Changing the narrative is one of the parts of my speech. And I talk about what changing the narrative actually means. Actually, I have my speech in front of me, and I have end stigma and labels, conversation, being vulnerable. Johann Hari in his books, Chasing the Scream, said the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connectivity. And if you think about that, there's a lot of value in that. Is you can be sober and be miserable and unhappy.
Right.
Sobriety is no guarantee that your life's going to be any better. It just means you're sober.
Right.
So connectivity is the key, having human conversation like you and I are doing right now.
Right.
People listening to your podcast, that's connectivity. And so those are some important things that we're going to share. And then whatever money I raise over this 95 days, and my goal's $1 million, and I have to think I'm going to do more than that. I'm giving 50% of it back to all the state partners that supported me during this project. And then the other 50% is going into my nonprofit.
That's fantastic. I wish you all the best. I just want to ask you one question about the government. What can our government do to attack the problem? It just doesn't seem like we're hearing enough about it. And like you said, it's taking 100,000 lives a year.
I'm going to give you an answer that probably is not going to go over well with a lot of your listeners and for most people. This isn't a government problem. I don't think the government is going to do anything. And it's not because I don't have trust in the government. I have more trust in people. I have more trust in our own ability to fix this problem. If we wait for the government, so let's say fentanyl's eradicated.
Yeah.
You're telling me that all of a sudden people are going to stop doing drugs?
Good point.
They're going to go to something else. Prohibition didn't work. I mean, there's evidence out there that taking stuff away or informing us more isn't going to work. I mean, think about this for a minute. Every single thing we eat, everything has a label on it with 800 things that are bad on the label. So
Exactly.
everything, a bottle of water has a label. Give me a break. There's nothing in water, but it's got a label. Yet, even though everything we eat tells us how bad things are for us, we're still 60% obese as a country, and we're the heaviest industrial country in the world, and we're getting fatter, but we're getting smarter. We know more about all this, but it's not working. So it isn't the government. It isn't labels. It isn't telling us what not to do. It's our inability to do with what we should be doing with the information that's out there. You can't tell me that people don't know drugs are bad. They do.
Yeah.
Smoking's bad. The label on a package of cigarettes takes up the whole cigarette box, but people still smoke. So I don't think the government's going to do anything. I just think we got to stop wanting the government to come help us. I think we got to say, you know what? Look in the mirror. There's your government. Fix your own life. Fix your problem. If you're drinking, try to get sober. If you're addicted to drugs, go get help. If you're depressed, try to find a way to get out of your depression, but don't wait for anyone to help you. You know, I don't think anyone's going to help you. And if they did try to help you, if you're an addict, you're not going to listen to them anyway.
Good point. Good point. Jeff, what tips do you have for parents out there to prevent their children from experimenting with drugs and alcohol? Any tips?
Well, you know what? That's tough because two reasons kids get into drugs and alcohol are the first one is exploring, and the other is escaping. So I'll take experimenting and off the table, and I'll say exploring. Okay. So the two core reasons why kids get into these issues, drugs and alcohol, is either they're escaping something, personal trauma, abusive household, you know, the stress of school, or they're just exploring. My alcohol abuse, Ron, started because I wanted to explore. I didn't start drinking in 8th grade because I was depressed or I was down. I mean, I was popular. I was getting decent grades. I was an athlete. I came from a good house. I wasn't abused. So I wasn't escaping anything. I was just bored, curious. So I think parents need to understand the motivations why kids do these things. Not all of the kids doing these things are doing them for the same reasons. But I think the reality is, sit down with your kids, tell them the 2 roads example, talk about the Don't Start initiative, the awareness, breathing, choosing. And then the bottom line is, here's the deal. I've lived my life. I'm 55. You're 17. You're 15. You're going to pave your own way. But just remember one thing, son. Choices precede consequences. Choices come before consequences. If you remember that, then when you're confronted with those decisions that seem little decisions, they always add up to big results. You know?
Yeah, excellent tips. Excellent. Jeff, what excites you the most going forward with your advocacy?
I would say the regular daily feedback I get from everybody I talk to, that I'm making a difference. And even though I feel like I'm not, you know, which sounds surprising, but sometimes I sit here at night in my studio and I look around and I think, am I really making a difference? You know, I question that even up to this moment, I question it sometimes. So I think when I get feedback from people, I get those emails, I get the handwritten notes, I get the calls, the texts, that just keeps me going. That adds fuel to my fire. But at the end of the day, I cannot let my remaining 2 boys see their dad crumble. And someone asked me the other day on a podcast, who's your favorite superhero? Like your Marvel superhero?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to answer this, but I don't want to sound like a narcissist. But I don't have a superhero. It's my dad. But I want to be a superhero to my boys. I don't Superman, Batman. I'm not into that stuff. I don't watch any of those shows. And, I just have never been an interest in fiction. I like nonfiction. I like documentaries. I like real life stories. And when I was asked that question, I said my dad was my superhero. And then I said, I want to be a superhero to my boys. They can't afford to lose somebody else. Think about this. I'm 55, Ron, and I just buried my mom. I had so many great years with my mom. She died just in November. My boys don't have a mom, and they're 20 and 18.
Yeah.
And they lost their older brother. I've got my 2 older brothers still alive. So right. I can't relate to what my boys are going through.
Yeah.
But they certainly need me to be strong.
Absolutely. That was a great answer you gave that fella. Jeff, how can people contact you? They want to get a hold of you.
Well, lots of ways.
Okay.
Yeah. Our website, the main website is www.livingundeterred.com. So www.livingundeterred.com. The tour information is on that site, but the tour also has its own website. That's www.livingundeterred.com. So it's a play of words. Undeterred, TOURD.com.
Gotcha.
That's the tour website. And then people can email me. It's just jeff@livingundeterred.com.
Okay. I'm going to list all that information in the podcast notes. I want to thank you, Jeff, for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and educating us on this important topic. You show so much courage and bravery doing your advocacy work. It is not easy to be vulnerable publicly, and your work is a godsend. I wish you nothing but success going forward in your mission of helping others, and good health and happiness to you and your family. Comments and suggestions to improve the podcast, you can email me at itsarapwithrap@gmail.com. Our website is itsarapwithrap.com. Our Facebook page and group. The group is growing very nicely. It's a Rap with Rap. Instagram, It's a Rap with Rap podcast. All the episodes on YouTube, It's a Rap with Rap, the podcast uncut. Thanks everyone for listening. Please stay safe. And for now, it's a wrap.